Hi, it's Danielle here with Coding Club Module 3. So at this point you should have downloaded, I sent you two new image files, only one of which you'll be using today, the cone. So if you haven't already downloaded those two image files, check your email and make sure those are downloaded. Today we are going to talk about ways of making your game interactive. So last week we just had this car driving around on this random background, and the only thing it did was not drive off the side of the screen, which is pretty boring. So today we are going to add some events to the game. Our learning objectives for today are to identify events and actions. Last time we talked about inputs, outputs, and behaviors. If you remember, inputs is information we put into the computer. Output is information that the computer kicks back out at us, and behavior are pretty much rules that our sprites follow. Today, like I said, we are going to add events and actions to our vocabulary list. So then we are going to learn, after we find out what an event and an action are, what they are, we are going to add them to our game. And then finally, once again, we are going to use our testing table to make sure the things that we added to our game indeed work. So on this slide, I have 6 items. 3 of them are events and 3 are actions. Now, using our everyday language is really hard to distinguish what the differences are with these examples.
Okay, here's a way to help you think about it. So remember how input is considered information that you give to a computer? So imagine it this way. The computer receives some type of input and it perceives that input as an event. So for instance, the computer might perceive me as raising my hand. So then the action is something that the computer would do in response to that. Or let's say you all are the computer. You all see me raise my hand, and then the action might be that when you see my hand, that is an indication that you are supposed to stand up. And so by standing up, I see you stand up, and so that is the output. So knowing that, take another look at this slide. What would be the input? That's going to be the event. And then what is going to be the output? That is the action. So if you take a look, the inputs here, or the events, are in yellow. When I pat my head, or I raise my hand, or I tap the table, that triggers an action from either you, the computer, and the actions in this case would be you waving your hands, or standing up, or clapping your hands. Actions and events are used in conditional statements. A condition is something has to happen in order for something else to happen. So in this case, the event is the condition. If I raise my hand, that is the event, then the action comes. So in this, like on the slide says, if the teacher raises their arm, then stand up. So the event or the condition is something that is inputted. That's something that you have to see, hear, read. That's the event. And action is what happens as a result of the event.
So now we are going to go back into the Construct 3 editor. So if you recall, we go to editor.construct.net. You should be logged in again with your access code. If you need a reminder, check that video that I sent you in the email. So we want you to go back into your Chasing Cherries game. You can load that, or you can go to this menu button and then click Project and then Open Recent. Okay, if you recall, we had the tiled background. I had a bunch of weird random tiles, but I just decided to resize this tile so that it fills up my whole page, that whole layout page, so that I have this whole green background. So that's my tiled background, and then I had the sprite, which was this car. Last session, we added some behaviors to the car. We added the 8 direction, which allowed us to steer the car using our arrows, and bound to layout. That prevented the car from driving off the edge. So that is where you should be now. You should have your tiled background with your car with 2 behaviors. If you don't have that done, go back and do module 2 and then come back here to module 3. So now we are going to add our first event. So we need something to happen when we play this game. So the first thing I want you to do is to take that cone image that I sent you and add that to your layout. So if you don't remember how to do that, you just double click the blank space, then you go to Sprite under General, and we are going to Insert. And then when you click somewhere, you get that sprite editor. So remember, I sent this to you, so it should already be downloaded. So if you click open and go to your downloads, I have a bunch of downloads, but I'm going to open this cone. And so then I have this traffic cone sprite, and I'm going to click X, and I have this giant traffic cone. That giant traffic cone is not going to make it easy for my car to drive around, so I'm going to resize it. So I'm going to make it a tinier traffic cone, and I'm going to move it. All right. I'm also going to do something, you're not going to see a lot of benefits today, but in future modules you will. So I'm going to highlight this background, and I'm going to lock it. I do that by right-clicking, clicking lock, lock selection. Right now we only have one layout. When we add additional layouts, by locking that background, we have the same background. So we don't have to keep adding the background every time. So I just did that for today. You don't need to, but that's a good thing to keep in mind. So now you should have your car sprite, your cone sprite, and your background. So just to help things out a little bit and just make it a little bit easier, I'm going to change the names of these items over here, because right now it's Sprite, Sprite 2, and tiled background. So I'm going to single click Sprite, single click, all right, and I'm going to change that to car. I'm going to single click Sprite 2, and then I'm going to call that cone. And then finally for tiled background, I'm going to single click it, and then I'm just going to call that background. All right. So those are our 3 items, and as you can see, they're listed alphabetically here. No biggie, just so you know. So we have our cone, we have our car, and we have our background. The only thing that's happening in this game is we have that behavior where we can steer the car on this layout. What I want to happen is that every time this car bumps into a cone, the cone disappears, okay? So we're going to go to our event sheet, and we're going to add an event. Okay, so now we are going to trigger an event. Remember I said now we are going to trigger an event. When the car hits the cone, I want the cone to disappear. So the event is going to be when the car hits the cone, okay? So I'm going to add an event. I'm going to start with the cone because I'm going to make multiple cones. And then I'm going to click next. So when the cone on collision with another object, I'm going to click next. And it wants to know what object that it can collide with. We only have one other object, not the background, because it's always colliding with the background, but the car. So I'm going to click OK, and I'm done. So when the cone collides with another car, that's our event. We need to add an action. So I'm going to add an action. I want the cone, next, to be destroyed. So I'm going to go to destroy next. All right, so there's my action. So if you recall, if we want to see if that works, we're going to go here to play. And I'm going to drive my car into the cone, and the cone was destroyed. So yay, it works. All right. All right, so now we can close out of this preview. I'm going to go back to my layout. So I am going to add some more cones because we're going to make this a little bit more challenging. So now I'm going to add some more cones, so I can just drag those onto my screen. So I'm going to show you something. Last time, remember, I had you change that view window so that it matched the layout. Today I'm going to make my layout a little bigger, and we're going to work on how we can still view our whole game when our view window is smaller than the layout. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click my layout. Remember I changed this last module to 1000 by 1000? This time I'm going to double the width. I'm going to change that to 2000 by 1000. So now I have a bigger layout. I am going to right click this background so I can unlock it. And then now I can resize it so it fits my layout again. Oops. And then I'm going to relock it by right clicking. All right, and so now what this allows me to do is to spread out my cone some. I want you to make sure you have your car with the two behaviors in the background, add a cone, add action or events, add events, and then an action on your event sheet for that cone. And then I want you to add some additional cones. Once you do that, again, this says worksheet 2. Ignore that. This is going to be your Google Sheet. Go to your Google form, rather. And you're going to do a test. You're going to test that the car moves with the arrows. We should have tested that last week. We're going to test that when a car collides with the cone disappears. And then finally, the car is visible easily when playing. Okay? So why don't you take a moment and you're going to run that testing table and see what results you get. So go ahead and add all of that to the Google form while you pause this video. When you're done with that first section, come back here. Okay, so I'm going to run my test really quick. So the first thing was to make sure that the car moves with arrows. It does. We got that to work last week. Now we're going to make sure that, that when a car hits a cone, we're going to make sure that cone is destroyed. So if you notice, I only added one event and one action, but that event and action is copied with every cone. So then I want to make sure the car displays easily. Remember, I have 3 more cones over on my right. And the same thing happened last week. The car drives off the screen. The car does not display easily. So therefore, my testing table is going to look like this. The car moves with arrows. I expected that the car moves with arrows and the car moves correctly. That was my outcome. Car collides with the cone and the cone disappears. That was my expected outcome. Actual outcome, when the cone disappears when it collides with the car. Because both of these worked, I don't have to do anything. Finally, car visible easily when playing. That's weirdly worded. The car is visible at the start of the game, but the car's not visible in the center, like it drives off. I need to set a new start view. That is the action that I need to take, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. We do that, I'm going to close out the preview, by adding another behavior to the car. So what we want is that imaginary camera to follow the car. So I'm going to click car, I'm going to go back down to my behaviors, and I'm going to add a new behavior. This time, scroll to. What that means is that the camera is going to hold the car in the center, so as the car moves, the camera is going to follow it so we can always see the car no matter where it goes. So I'm going to add that. So now I'm going to go back to my preview. Again, I still can't see those other 2 cones. I'm going to grab these 2 cones really quick because I don't know, I guess that's the point of the game. But as you can see, as I go to the right, the camera is scrolling, so all of my cones show. So now my Google form is correct, and I don't have to do a new action here. Okay, here's the final question, just to make sure you remember, and you can go back and look at your game if you're having trouble. The final question on your Google form in section 3 is what is missing to complete the event and the action? So when the cone on what with the car, that's the event, and then what is the action? What happens to the cone? So see if you can remember what the event was and what the action was. If you need help, just go back to your event sheet on your game and take a look and fill that in. And that's it for today's lesson. Remember, Coding Club meets live every Wednesday from 2 until 3 p.m. So if you had some trouble, or if you just want to try some new things with some other people, go ahead and come to Coding Club on Wednesdays. If not, hopefully you'll come back for Module 4 next week. Thanks.